Okay, 200.
All in.
All in.
Guys, I am just getting ready to head out to Great Canadian Casino to play a session, and let's see how that goes. For the first interesting hand, I pick up 9-10 of hearts at the small blind. There are 3 limpers starting from the low jack. I am out of position and my hand is not that strong, but I decide to take a jab at all the dead money from the late position limpers. I raise it to $25. Only the low jack calls. It's heads up into a flop of ace king king rainbow. I hit absolutely nothing but backdoor draws, but the flop is good for my range, so I c-bet for $20. The villain calls. The turn is a brick. I need to now decide if I should wave the white flag or go for the second barrel with basically no equity at all. I choose the latter. It's early in the session and I don't have much of a perceived image yet, so I'm hoping players will give me the benefit of the doubt when it comes to credibility. I continue repping my range and lead out with a pot size bet of $100. The villain thinks for a bit and folds. This hand, I pick up ace-9 at the cutoff. There's a button straddle of $6. Only the small blind calls and everyone else folds to me. I raise it to $25. The button and small blind calls. It's 3-way into a flop of 10-5-5. Everyone checks to the button, who bets $30. The small blind folds. I am out of position, I hit nothing. The flop doesn't benefit my range at all, and I don't even have 2 overcards or backdoors to peel a turn. So I just fold. This hand, I pick up king queen of clubs at under the gun +1. There's a button straddle to $6. Both of the blinds call. Under the gun folds. This hand is normally a raise for me, but I have been opening quite a bit already, so I have to be a bit more cautious with my ranges and early positions, as I'll likely get called more wide. My hand is a type that I really want to see a flop, but not quite strong enough to raise for value out of position. The straddle and callers already bloat the pot a bit, so I don't have to worry about the pot being too small, and also don't want to risk playing a 3-bet pot bloated to start. I call. The middle position also calls. The cutoff raises to $35. Everyone folds except for me and the middle position. It's 3-way into a flop of queen 8-4 with 1 club. The action checks to the cutoff, the initial raiser. He c-bets for $55. With top pair, good kicker, I'm not going anywhere quite yet. I call. The middle position also calls. The turn is the 7 of clubs. I tank for a bit here. With all the previous action, I'm really not sure if I'm in the lead with just top pair. There aren't logical 2-pair combos on board, but sets, aces, kings, and ace-queen beats me. I do block ace-queen and kings, but I'm not totally eliminating those combos, as ace-queen and kings still make up 11 combos in total. The player most likely to have a set would be the middle position, but since he didn't raise the flop, it's slightly less likely. The turn card is a great one for me, giving me the flush draw, and couldn't really have helped anyone else, aside from 5-6, which I think is safe to say would not be in here at all. If I check, I don't know if I can get away from a turn bet with such a strong draw. Well, any bet short of an all-in. And if I miss, I'll be in such a horrible spot. Since I won't be folding to a turn bet, I decide to go all in myself. This way, I'll maximize fold equity from one pair hands, and I won't allow others the opportunity to fold out my equity. I fully expect to be snap called by the middle position if he has a set, but even then I'll have outs. The middle position folds, and that is awesome news. And now I just have to get through the cutoff, who tanks for a long time. At this point, I'm not even sure if I want to call or fold. He ends up folding, and I take this one down. The villain then tells me he folded pocket aces and asked me what I had. I just looked at him and smiled. He was polite and nice about it, but he kept asking and was very insistent, to the point that I felt it would seem rude for me to not give him a proper response. And what I replied to him was kind of off character for me, I think, and I think it's kind of fun to share with you guys. So I'm now going to cut to my instant recap and reaction.
So I stepped outside just to do this recap. This is right after the hand that I had, King Queen of Clubs, and I went all in on the turn and got it full from aces. And I just thought I'd share this with you guys. So something about me, I basically never lie at the table. Like when the hand is over and people ask me what I had and stuff like that, I either stay silent, or even if I say something, I would never like tell them fake info. I just think there's no reason to do that. But for this hand though, when the opponent asked me what I had after him telling me he had aces, I just said good fold, kind of like hinting that I had something stronger. And it was just like a trigger reaction. I just kind of felt like the guy was pretty nice, and I kind of didn't want him to feel too bad. I didn't mean to be deceptive or anything like that, but I just kind of wanted him to feel good about himself, like making a good laydown. That's pretty much it.
This hand, I pick up ace-king at the button. Under the gun +1 limps and the cutoff limps. I raise it up to $25. The small blind calls. The big blind folds. Both of the limpers call. It's four-way into a flop of ace-8-3 rainbow. Everyone checks to me. Great flop with ace high and as dry as it can be. I c-bet for $30, targeting weaker aces and 8x. Only the small blind calls. The turn is a deuce, essentially a brick. The villain checks. I continue betting for value. I really want to get 3 streets from a weaker ace, and just in case he has an 8 or pocket pair, I want to keep all of those in as well. I bet $40. The villain calls. The river is a 7, which should be another brick. The villain checks again. I bet $45, targeting a crying call from any one pair hand at this point. The villain, however, does not make a crying call. He decides to go all in, which puts me in the tank now. I don't think he has one pair anymore. I don't think there are a lot of 2-pair combos that make too much sense here. So it looks like a set or random bluff. In the end, I just don't see any sets that would play this way. There would have been a raise already if he had a really strong hand. So I decide to flick in the call. The villain tables pocket 7s, and I muck my hand. This hand, I pick up pocket 6s on the button. Under the gun +1 opens to $15. Everyone folds to me, and I call to set mine. The small blind calls and the big blind folds. The flop comes 6-8 king, all diamonds. Everyone checks to me. Great flop hitting a set. The monotone board is not ideal, but in position, I value bet for $30, targeting king X or a high diamond. The small blind calls and +1 folds. The turn is an offsuit 9. The villain checks. I continue to bet for value, this time at $60. The villain calls. The river is a 7. The villain checks again. This is a pretty bad river card. It's not a fourth diamond, but it's pretty much the next worst thing. A card that makes a 4-card straight on board. I contemplate for a little bit about making a value bet, but with this run out, I don't think there are a lot of hands to extract value from. Also, this is the same guy that check raised me on the river previously. So I decide to check and table my hand. The villain mucks, and I take this one down. This hand, I pick up ace-queen in the hijack position. Everyone folds to me, and I open to $10. Only the cutoff calls. It's heads up into a flop of ace-8-3 rainbow. I c-bet for $10. The villain calls. The turn is a 5, essentially a brick. I continue to bet for value, mainly targeting a weaker ace or non-believing 8x. I bet $30, and the villain folds. This hand, I pick up ace-queen on the button. There is an under the gun straddle to $6. Only +1 calls, and everyone folds to me. I pump it up to $25. Under the gun and +1 both call. It's 3-way into a flop of 8-7-3 with 2 hearts. Everyone checks to me. In a multi-way flop that doesn't hit my hand or my range, I think it's usually best to check back. So I check. The turn is another 8. Under the gun now leads out for $35. +1 calls. With just ace high and probably low to 0 equity, I just fold. This hand, I pick up king 5 of clubs in the hijack position. Only the low jack limps, so I decide to raise it to $15 to isolate. The cutoff, big blind, and low jack calls. It's 4-way into a flop of queen king 6 with 2 clubs. The big blind checks, and the low jack goes all in for $42. With this action, my top pair weak kicker is not necessarily in the lead, but with the flush draw as well, it's definitely one of the best flops I can ask for. I call. The cutoff also goes all in, but not for a whole lot more. The big blind folds. Pretty easy call for me. We go to a run out. The turn is an ace, and the river is another king. We table our hands. The low jack has king jack. The cutoff has ace jack of clubs for the nut flush draw that turned top pair and then got rivered by the last king. So actually this was a pretty lucky run out for me. I end up scooping the side pot and chopping the main pot. This hand, I pick up queen 9 at the cutoff. Everyone folds to me and I open to $10. Only the big blind calls. It's heads up into a flop of jack 10-6 with 2 clubs. The villain checks. With an open ender and backdoor club draw, I decide to c-bet for $10. The villain calls. The turn is a queen. The villain checks again. Now my hand has improved to top pair with an open ender. I continue to bet for value. This time I size up to $35, targeting jack X hands and draws. Hands like ace jack, king jack, maybe even king 10. He calls. The river is an ace. The villain now leads out for $200. Not the best run out. I don't see any bluffs here. I block the club draw, and he is not at all fazed by a king in my range, which can only mean he has it. I lay this one down. This hand, I pick up 7-5 on the button. Only the hijack limps. I decide to raise and either isolate or take down some dead money. I make it $15. Everyone folds except for the limper. It's heads up into a flop of 8-deuce-3. The villain checks. I have nothing but 7 high and some backdoor draws. The flop doesn't hit my range at all, but it also doesn't look like something that would hit the villains. I decide to c-bet small for $10. I figure I only have to rep high card hands like ace king or ace queen to fold out hands that completely missed and has given up. The villain calls. The turn is a 7. The villain checks again. I now hit a pair and have some showdown value. Checking back to navigate to showdown is a valid option, I think. If I do bet, it would be for either protection or telling a story to fold out 8x. I decide to go with the latter option. I bet $30 to keep the betting lead, in case I need to turn a mediocre pair into a triple barrel bluff. Hopefully I can just take it down now. The villain calls. The river is a 6. The villain now leads out for $200. Well, that certainly changes my plan. I guess it's a good thing he didn't rope me in to fire a third barrel. Now I can just make an easy laydown. This hand, I pick up pocket kings at the cutoff. Only the low jack limps. I raise it to $15 and only the limper calls. It's heads up into a flop of ace queen queen rainbow. The villain checks. One of the worst flops pocket kings can ask for. I check back for pot control. The turn is a jack. The villain checks again. I now make a delayed c-bet for value, targeting jack x hands with a straight draw, etc. I bet $15, and the villain folds. This hand, I pick up pocket aces at under the gun. I open to $15. The cutoff, button, and big blind calls. It's four-way into a flop of 8-7-3 with 2 diamonds. The big blind checks to me. I c-bet for half pot at $30. Only the cutoff calls. The turn is an offsuit deuce, essentially a brick. This villain stack is pretty short. I should mention that this session I have been quite active and opening a lot compared to the rest of the table. Some of the players are showing tendencies to look me up more and just not believe me. This villain is one of them. At this point, I'm just thinking of the best way to get all the chips in. I want to keep in with any one pair hand, 8x, 7x, or any pocket pairs. I bet around quarter pot at $30, targeting all of those hands. This is a sizing that will pretty much commit his remaining stack by the river, no matter what it is. He calls. The river is a 10. Not much more for me to do. I follow through with my plan and go all in. The villain sighs, but does quickly call. I table my hand and take it down as he mucks. This hand, I pick up 10 jack of spades in the big blind. Everyone folds to the button, who jams all in for $19. The small blind calls, and I also call. It's three-way with one all in, so it's actually heads up for a side pot, into a flop of ace-8-6 with 1 spade. The villain checks. Not much point of betting into a dry side pot. I check back. The turn is the queen of spades. The villain bets $20. I have now picked up a flush draw and double gutter, so easy call for me. The river bricks. The villain now checks. I don't think I'm winning any of the pots here at showdown with jack high, but there is a side pot of $40, and the villain checking on the flop and river does tell me he isn't too strong. I go for a bet of $75, only targeting to fold out the small blind so I can take down the side pot. He does find a fold. I table my jack high. The dealer tables ace king to take the main pot while I take the smaller side pot. This hand, I pick up king 10 on the button. Only under the gun plus 1 limps. I raise it up to $15 to isolate or take it down. The big blind and the limper calls. It's three-way into a flop of 10-9-6 with 2 diamonds. Everyone checks to me. Hitting top pair, good kicker. On a board that actually favors the villain's ranges more than mine is pretty good here. I can potentially get value from a lot of weaker 10x combos and all the draws. I c-bet for $20. Only the big blind calls. The turn is a jack of diamonds. The villain checks. Not a great card for me. The flush gets there. 10 Jack is a very reasonable two-pair hand. Checking for pot control is okay, but I still think there is value to be made from hands like 10-8, 9-8, or a random high diamond. I continue to bet for value and make it $35. The villain calls. The river is another 9. The villain checks again. Here, taking a showdown is more than fine. One could argue that getting 2 streets of value with my hand is great, and a river bet would be value owning myself. But seeing how the villain checked 3 times, I decided to go for one more street of thin value. There are still 8 combos of 10 queen, 8 combos of 10-8, pocket 8s or 7s make up 12 combos, and all of these hands will likely make a crying call to a small bet. I bet $35. The villain folds, and I take this one down. This hand, I pick up ace-5 on the button. The hijack opens to $12. The cutoff folds. Against a late position open, I decide to 3-bet with an ace and make it $40. Everyone folds except the initial raiser. It's heads up into a flop of 8-7-4 with 2 clubs. The villain leads out for $25. Not a great flop for my range, but I do have a gut shot that would make a super sneaky straight if I hit. I call to peel a turn. The turn is a 5, which now gives me a pair. The villain continues to lead out, this time for $60. Not a good spot for me, and I should probably let this one go at this point. But there is a club draw out there that I unblock, so ace queen or ace king of clubs can be taking this line. There is potential for me to bluff off a 1-pair hand on a scary board on the river. I get a bit sticky and call. The river is a king. The villain now checks. I think for a bit. I could follow through and turn my hand into a bluff, but I do have a little bit of showdown value, and the missed flush draw is still a possibility. And my bluff, story-wise, doesn't actually make too much sense. If he had a bluff catching hand and is able to put it together, I could be digging myself a deep hole. I decide to check back and hope I'm beating a flush draw. The villain tables pocket queens, and I muck my hand. This hand, I pick up ace-8 of spades at the cutoff. There's an under the gun straddle to $6. Everyone folds to me, and I open to $20. Only the straddler calls. It's heads up into a flop of king ace 6 with 2 spades. Great flop for me, hitting top pair and the nut flush draw. The villain leads out for $30. Easy call for me. The turn is an 8. My hand just keeps getting better and better. The villain continues to lead out, this time for $45. I pretty much cover the whole board. I'm only losing to ace king and sets. And a set of kings, aces, or ace king is not too likely without a 3-bet against me pre-flop. I just want all the chips committed by the river. With my stack, I did some math and figured that a min raise here is best, which would leave an SPR of close to 1 on the river. I raise it to $90. The villain calls. The river is a jack of spades. Even though I do hit the nut flush, I'm actually not so sure it's a good card because it could potentially slow the action. However, the villain leads out again for $200. So now I'm thinking it's pretty obvious he also has a flush. Only one move left here. I go all in. The villain calls. We table our hands and I beat queen 7 of spades, which is the second nut flush. This hand, I pick up ace king at under the gun +1. Under the gun raises to $15, which I actually didn't see. So I put out $15 thinking I was the one opening, but only realized moments later that I'm actually calling a raise. I would 100% 3-bet in this spot, but because I didn't pay attention, this hand is going to cost me. Anyways, there are 5 more players that call, including the blinds, so it's 7-way into a flop of Queen, Queen, Jack, Rainbow. Everyone checks. The turn is a 10, and I managed to turn the nut straight. Everyone checks to me, and I bet $40. Only the hijack and under the gun calls. The river is a 6. Under the gun checks. I just bet $50 for value. I know a queen could pay me off more, but with a flush draw on the turn, I think I would have heard from a naked queen on that street. So I also want to target Jack X. The hijack thinks for a bit, and then calls. Under the gun then check raises to $250. Not a great spot holding the nut straight, but there just aren't any value hands that I can beat here. I don't think even a lower straight can check raise here. The only hand that makes the most sense would be a full house that was already there on the flop or turn, making it unnecessary to protect against the flush draw. I lay this one down. The hijack also folds. The villain shows Queen Jack for the flop boat. I tell him, nice hand. This hand, I pick up Ace Deuce of clubs under the gun. I open to $10. Only the cutoff and small blind calls. It's 3-way into a flop of Ace 9-9 with 2 spades and 1 club. On a board that I'm either way behind or way ahead, I check to pot control. Everyone else checks. The turn is an 8. Everyone checks to the cutoff, who now bets $25. The small blind folds, and I call. The river is a brick. I don't think the villain could ever have a 9 here to check back the flop. So he could have hit an 8 on the turn, or he could be bluffing with air, just trying to take down the pot with position. I don't even think I could get a call with a value bet targeting an 8, so I decide the best play here is to check and feed him the rope to bluff. I check. The villain bets $75. I'm actually quite happy to see a large bet indicative of a bluff. I pretty much already planned to call, but I do take a brief moment to go over the hand, and then I flick in the call. The villain mucks his hand, and I take this one down. This hand, I pick up King Queen of clubs at the hijack position. Under the gun limps and +1 raises to $15. The action folds to me. I have been opening and 3-betting quite a bit, so against a fishy under the gun limp, as well as an early position raise, I decide to cold call this one, as I really want to see a flop with this hand. Everyone else folds except for the limper, who calls. It's 3-way into a flop of Jack 3-5 with 1 club. Everyone checks to me. With only king high and back doors, I would mostly check back here multi-way, but once in a while I can take a jab. I would say that this board actually benefits me most because there aren't many Jack X hands that from early position opens or limp calls. My hand also blocks a lot of Jack X combos. I bet $35. Only under the gun calls. The turn is a 10. The villain checks again. I was really hoping to take it down on the flop, but now that I picked up extra equity on the turn hitting an open ender, I think it makes most sense to go for a second barrel. I bet $75. The villain calls again. The river is a 5. The villain checks a third time. I know that a third barrel is the most obvious move in this spot, but with my perceived image and the villain having not a lot of chips behind, I think I don't have quite enough fold equity to get this one through. With that run out, it's hard for me to think of a value hand that would fold to me, so I just wave the white flag and check back. The villain announces I missed. I table my hand, still not sure if I'm good. The villain tables 6-4 offsuit, and I surprisingly take this one down with king high. here are the results of the session that you just watched. I bought in for $700 and I cashed out for $830. That is a profit of $130. And I think that session was a really good one to capture for you guys. A lot of interesting spots. I made some bad calls, made some good calls, made a couple good folds, made some plays that worked and some plays that did not work. At the end of the day, finished with a little bit of profit, which is nice. And that brings my total bankroll to this number you see right here. So upon finishing that session, it was actually exactly 1 month or 30 days since I started this bankroll challenge. And I thought it would be interesting to share with you guys my stats so far. For in this 1 month. A huge caveat though I should put in there is that I was sick for 10 days. So there was a 2-week period where I just didn't go to any poker rooms at all. I definitely put in a lot less volume than I would have liked to. Okay, let's get to those numbers. I played a total of 8 sessions. That's 32 hours. And I'm up in total $1,371. And that is an average hourly rate of around $42, which is that's actually pretty good. That's because I'm sticking within all 1-3 sessions and below, so that's more than 10 BBs per hour, which is good. Hope I can keep that up. Let's see, ROI 35%. I won 75. My win rate is 75%, which is really high. But I just don't have enough volume to really make that number meaningful. There's no way I'm going to keep that up. Okay, so let's see what the chart looks like. I'll show the graphics on this side. Yeah. Just 8 sessions, not really a lot to look at, but you'll see the trending graph. That's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next episode.